Hello, I'm Jane Vowles.
I'm Pami Natterson.
I am Sheila Judah.
I'm Kirsten Patterson.
I am Kamala Rampersad Silva.
This is Kali Chui. As CEO of this institute, I am pleased to be collaborating with other female leaders
who are working incredibly hard to improve governance practices in their regions.
It is noteworthy that even as the challenges of COVID-19 are impacting our governance practices,
in many boardrooms, women's voices are absent,
silent,
or go unheard.
Yet, it is clear that the economic impact of COVID-19 is devastating.
Not only in terms of the estimated $90 trillion lost globally,
but as we see happening in some countries,
emotions are running high with respect to dealing with very fundamental decisions
like economic recovery,
reopening borders,
vaccinations,
and freedom of choice.
We cannot afford to lose out on the contribution women can make
to solve some of these problems.
We welcome you
as you join us in this three-part series
on women in governance to bring positive change.
Positive change.
Positive change.
A change where we embrace all our voices
so that we can all contribute effectively to making governance worldwide more effective,
inclusive,
and diverse.
In other words, let's stop competing
and begin collaborating.
Let's help solve many of these problems.
And embracing diversity and inclusiveness. We are very fortunate to be able to operate, value, and uphold a fair and competitive marketplace in Hong Kong. During the 3-day event, I understand that this may not necessarily be the case in many parts of the world. In particular, women's voices in many parts of the world may still be often not fairly heard and valued. Hence, we should be grateful and not take things for granted in Hong Kong as we continue with our long march for diversity and inclusiveness. Let's now hear what our panelists have to share with us in this space. Katherine, shall we start with you? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, apologies that I'm a bit blurry. There's some technical issue. I've tried to wipe the camera, but it's still very blurry. But not to worry, because you will soon be, I think, looking at the PowerPoint rather than me. So let me try to share the screen now. Okay, here we go. Thank you for introducing me, and thank you for inviting me to this forum and giving us, the Stock Exchange and also Hong Kong Securities Institute, an opportunity to talk about this subject: corporate governance, women on board, ESG, all very dear to my heart in both my professional life as well as a passion of mine. So I'm glad kind of Ada gave a very good overview, a broad overview of the rules that are currently in place in Hong Kong as well as internationally. So I wouldn't go into that in much detail, but I think to start off with, I just want to set the scene a bit by talking and discussing about the journey. When it comes to ESG, corporate governance, diversity, it doesn't happen overnight. It cannot happen overnight. And we need to do what is right, what is the right direction, as well as you doing what is appropriate for Hong Kong. There's absolutely no point forcing kind of a large quota, or forcing a regulation through Hong Kong that Hong Kong companies are not ready for. So I think we started off in 2013 at the listing committee. The listing committee decided that board diversity is a priority. It's a priority for listed companies. It's a priority for Hong Kong. So At that point, 2013, we asked every company to, on a comply or explain basis, think about their diversity, talk about their diversity policy, let their stakeholders understand what diversity, board diversity means to them. And then, over the years, we modify, we improve upon our regulations. We actually tighten the regulations. In 2017, we improve our risk management and internal control. And in the more recent years, in the last 2 years, under Andrew's chairmanship and leadership, we went even several steps further. We made, I think we are the first country, first jurisdiction in the world that mandates every single listed issuer must have a diversity policy. We focus on single gender boards of companies that are coming to list in Hong Kong, coming to Hong Kong for the first time, IPO applicants. We tell these companies that, look, if Hong Kong is your home in the future, if this is where you want to list, we do not accept single gender boards. You need to give us a guarantee or a undertaking that within maybe 2 or 3 years, you will find a female on your board. And all of them do that. And we've been tracking their progress. And I'll say kind of vast majority of the recently IPO companies have added at least one female on their boards. And some have even gone further, do it a bit faster or added kind of 2 or 3 on their boards. We've also started to tackle the overboarding issues of INED. This is to do with time commitment of an individual. And on the CG consultation that's been published this year, fresh off the press, we published it in April. We hope to close it up before the end of the year. We're focusing on culture, board refreshment, diversity again, no surprises there. And I'll talk about it a bit later about what we're trying to do, and communication to shareholders. Now, the top part of the slides talk about the policy we have in place. It's very well, a regulator can throw out and impose as much policy and as high a requirement as we wish, but it's another thing whether the market is ready for it. So for every policy that we ask the issuers to comply with, for every regulation we ask of the market, we do want to support it to the best of our ability. We are not in asking for regulation for the sake of regulation. We're looking for market quality improvement. And how do we do that? We need to explain to the market, explain to the directors what we're looking for and the benefits. We want the company to value in what they're doing. It's not a compliance cost. We hope that companies sees the benefit, and if they do, I mean, they will do it to their best ability and see how it fits the market best. So we've put out, guidance for board and directors. This is a pretty high level guidance aimed at directors about how CG, how diversity could help their company, how it could possibly help with their sustainability journey. We've done e-training. Some of it is aimed at directors, others are aimed at management, and then we have some that's aimed at people who's actually writing the report. We have the support of Carly and the Institute and the HKIoD. They are frequent contributors to our training. We've done at the end of last year, we published a guidance for IPO applicants. We want to make sure the market, internationally, people who want to come to list in Hong Kong, both potential listed issuers and sponsors, know that we don't treat CG ESG as an afterthought. If you're coming to Hong Kong for an IPO, you need to make sure that you've covered your CG ESG risk. We're looking for disclosure, we're looking for system, we're looking for internal control from day one. From the day that you are a Hong Kong listed company, you become part of our family. We expect certain standards from these new listed applicants. What we don't want is that, come the end of the first year, come kind of annual report season, they start writing the annual report as an afterthought. This is not what we're looking for. We're looking for a framework, a system in place from the first day they're being listed. So I think that's a message that's loud and clear. I mean, from time to time, every year, we look at how companies are doing from their corporate governance. We try to learn from it. We try to give guidance to the market. this company is doing particularly well. Why? What are the aspects that investors and stakeholders and people who read their reports appreciate of it? So we do kind of on an ongoing basis try to help the market improve on their corporate governance, diversity, ESG standards. The areas that, this is this slide talks about our consultation this year and the areas that we are focused on. We want INEDs to provide a check and balance. We talked about, overboarding of INEDs. We want INEDs to give them their best, to give them their all. So it's kind of hard if you are on the board of multiple companies. So we want INEDs to focus. We want companies to kind of critically think about if a director has been on their board as well as kind of 5 or 6 or 7 other boards. Are they spending enough time? We want to make sure that the INEDs are able to provide independent views. And from a diversity perspective, which is a big yellow section and a priority and a focus of our consultation, we think that we already have under Andrew's leadership, every company must have a diversity policy, but we want to go further. I've talked about IPO applicants. We haven't been kind of accepting IPO applicants for single gender board blanketly kind of for the last 2 years already. So what is the next step? We are now focusing our energy on listed issuers. We have 2,500 listed issuers in Hong Kong. Currently, there are 800 companies, more than 800 companies with single gender board. So these are the companies that we propose to give a deadline to, a 3-year transition, of which they must turn around. They must critically assess their board diversity aspect. I think the community, Hong Kong community, international community, investment community, has kind of unified on this point to accept that single gender board is not a diverse board. So that is step one. Now, gender is not the only thing. There are other aspects of diversity that the company needs to think about. Background, ethnics, years of experience, age, we're looking for different perspectives. So companies need to go back and think about what makes their board great, what makes a good board composition for them. We're looking for targets, timeline on gender diversity. Companies can't kind of write wishy-washy aspirations. It's not an aspiration statement. We are looking for action. We're looking for numbers. And we want companies to review the effectiveness of their diversity policy. It's not something that, is set in stone. It's not something that you do once every 10 years. Your company does evolve. Companies do, whether it's a different business field or with the different changes in circumstances or public policies or areas that a company is into, or what the community expects, the need for your diversity policy might need to change from time to time. And what is a diverse board for you 10 years ago might not still be the case 10 years later. Another area is refreshment of the board to avoid entrenchment. We've had some directors that sit on the boards for a very, very long time. There is I think it's fair to say that we're looking for new perspectives all the time, but it's hard. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all. There are directors who sat on the board for a very long time and they're very effective. They have all the experience. They've seen a couple of cycles, and you don't want to lose that experience. We understand that at the exchange. I think your stakeholder would understand it as well. But at the same time, if you tell me kind of all your directors have sat on your board, all your INEDs have sat there for 20 plus years, and you have no plans of refreshing that, then I think we would have a problem. So we're coming at this from a succession planning perspective. We're coming at it from a board refreshment perspective, and we're not kind of questioning the ability or the contribution of the long-serving INEDs. But if an INED, if all your INEDs have been there for longer than 9 years, then we're proposing that you should add a new INED for fresh perspective. Engagement with shareholders is another area. I mean, Kali and I have talked about this many times, and we've exchanged views, and with the Institute as well, about how shareholders, institutional or retail, are increasingly looking for accountability from directors. They want to hear from the directors. So I think in the past kind of 10 or 20 years ago, people just thought of it as a one-way communication, companies just giving out information, publishing things, publishing circular, putting on an announcement. But I think this day in time, investors' expectation is slightly different. They want a bit of a dialogue. They want their voices to be heard. They want questions to be asked. So we're just saying that there should be a forum. There should be a channel for two-way communication between the directors and the investors. This could be on diversity, it could be on their business needs, but there needs to be a channel. ESG, I'll go through this very quickly because it is a hot topic, and I think it's important for directors to know that climate change, climate-related disclosure is big in Hong Kong and internationally. I think for Hong Kong, all the regulators have agreed to look for, to have their regulators, listed companies, banks, insurance authority to have climate-related disclosure by 2025. So they need to be TCFD aligned climate disclosure. We want ESG report, including diversity information, to be published at the same time as the annual report. Currently, the companies have about a month gap between the annual report and the ESG diversity information. But I think the investors and stakeholders are now viewing non-financial information as important as financial information. They don't want stale information. So I think if all goes well, if the consultation goes through, we are looking at diversity, ESG information to be published alongside the annual reports. And then there is, we're focused on carbon and reduction of carbon intensity. Hong Kong has said that they need to reduce carbon intensity to 70% by 2030 and carbon neutral by 2050. So this is not going to happen overnight. We want companies to start planning. Your board needs to know about it. Your board needs to start planning today about, how to get to 2030 and the 2050 milestone. You can't just wake up 2029 and do it. So is that being in place? China as well has a carbon neutrality goal by 2060. And eventually we will have international sustainable standards that is consistent and comparable. And that's all being worked at. On this slide, it's our ESG journey, which includes, some diversity issues as well. ESG, it's again a journey. It started off being voluntary roughly 10 years ago. We've moved it to mandatory 5 years ago, and now we're kind of adding things in having had conversations with both the investors and issuers. What information they find helpful, what information is important to make an informed investment decision. And it's quite. Some people who are new to ESG might think that it's about disclosure of data, regurgitating of data, but from the feedback and of consultation we received, it's not about that at all. What investors seem to want to know is how ESG diversity issues are being governed and reported. They want to know how the board thinks about their ESG issue. I mean, if you have a 1 woman, 2 women, 3 women on the board, how do they think it affects their board diversity and hence the ability of their board to govern? I think there's no right and wrong answer here, but investors genuinely want to understand the company's thought process in putting together a mosaic of their board directors. We've put together, the Hong Kong regulators have put together a green and sustainable cross-agency group that has SFC, HKMA, Insurance Authority, Environmental Bureau, FSTB, MPFA in it to talk about how we can make Hong Kong financial system more sustainable. And again, at the middle, we talk about the support the stock exchange gives to improving our ESG disclosure, diversity disclosure. We did an ESG Academy back in May this year to talk about the importance of diversity. And I'll share with you now, by the end of the year, we should have, or early next year, we'll have a diversity repository on our website. So we'll have diversity data of all the listed issuers. You know, currently, if an investor wants to find out what a board composition looks like, they probably have to go on the website of each single company. We're pulling some data together at the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and hopefully it'll give the market more transparency on how we're doing. In terms of ESG, the yellow box.
Katherine, hi, this is Bonnie. Can I have you wrap up in 1 minute? Because
sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm on my last near last page, so I'm nearly done. So this is just to show you, you know, Hong Kong listed issuers are very, very compliant. All of them publish ESG report, all of them publish ESG report on time. They comply more than they explain. So it's just to show that, you know, Hong Kong listed issuers do take their regulations seriously and do it on time. So training, this is kind of just to show you that our training is quite popular. It's been viewed by thousands of people around the world, not just Hong Kong, as far down as, you know, South America. People found it quite useful. This is what to expect in 2021. Third quarter, we will do our, you know, a bit more guidance around IPO. We're working on TCFD guidance. We'll publish our conclusions before the end of the year, and the diversity repository I talked about. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine. So for all those who want to, you know, as women wanting to work in Hong Kong ecosystem, should be mindful of what Katherine told us about all those ESG initiatives. So now over to Andrew. Although our topic today is women in governance, he is really the living example of us demonstrating diversity on our panel. So thank you again, Andrew, and here you go. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie. Great to be here. Can I just check you can hear me okay?
Perfect.
Good. Well, look, wonderful to be here. And I think the Women in Governance series is fantastic. I was actually listening into the earlier sessions, and I was quite encouraged that some of the themes I'm mentioning got touched on in the earlier panel. And Carly, it's wonderful that the Hong Kong IOD is pushing this under your leadership, and Bonnie, you chairing this, and of course, my old friends Katherine and Clara from the Stock Exchange. It's great we're together. Big picture point, governance is super important. Huge change going on in the world. Understanding that change and how governance helps us navigate through that change, we all need to understand it and the role we play. And for those of us who are talking about inclusion and diversity, what better way to get included than to understand these trends and bring value on these trends, and then inclusion and diversity would take care of itself. Hong Kong as an IFC is a very important point you raised, Bonnie. I'm glad you did. The media coverage outside Hong Kong, particularly in places like the UK and US, is very negative. It is somewhat disconnected from reality on the ground. Hong Kong as an IFC is still a record-breaking raiser of funds. As Ada would say, record number of new companies being launched, new legal structures for private equity, new incentives. And I certainly think any talk about Hong Kong's demise is not just exaggerated, it's totally untrue. Economically, the Hong Kong story, as it integrates more with mainland and retains its hub capability and its center of intellectual capital, is going to be very, very strong. And fundamental to that is rule of law and governance and quality directors. So I just want to say that very positive. You cannot see Hong Kong's future as an IFC separate from governance, and you cannot see governance separate from these very challenging global themes we're seeing. So what I call it is board leadership in the new reality. And a challenge for all of us is to find our role in that and understand it and bring value. And maybe I could share some of those themes and link it back to the diversity and inclusion story. I mean, the way I see it is the first question is it a new reality out there, or is it more of the same? And I think the answer is a bit of both. Certain things are changing hugely, but certain fundamental principles still apply. And I had a recent forum with a lot of non-executive directors where I highlighted 10 major themes we're seeing at the moment. And I'll just read them out and then I'll hone in on a couple I think are super important. ESG, climate, purpose, behavior, resilience, digital, data, modeling, liquidity, supply chain. These are sort of the 10 themes we're seeing the most of in our client world and in the governance world. But if you envisage these being around a center point, the center point is governance. And all of these, be it ESG, be it supply chain, be it modeling, be it data, have a massive governance requirement and a governance overlay. A risk framework, 3 lines of defense apply to all of these. And if you envisage beneath that a foundation, governance is the obvious one, but increasingly culture, values, and conduct. And what I want to share with everyone on the call is one doesn't have to be an expert in those 10 themes. If one understands the concepts and principles of good governance, good culture, good values, and good conduct. And I think the diversity and inclusion discussion gets incredibly powerful if one gets back to fundamental principle. If one puts gender just to one side for a second. As Katherine is an expert on this, when we launched the diversity framework for the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, it was all about diversity of perspective. And diversity of perspective with better shareholder information and communication gives rise to better decision-making. Better investment know-how, investor know-how, and better decision-making and governance in organizations. So how do you get diversity of perspectives? By avoiding groupthink and having different type of people on the board sharing their view. And then within that, the most important subset is gender. And I'm very proud that now a new listed company cannot list by having a single gender board, but it's nowhere near enough, as Ada and a couple of people mentioned. The journey to having 30% of women on a board has to accelerate. When you hear of members on a board, they feel that you get better diversity of perspectives when there's more than one person representing that diverse perspective. So we started the journey, but the diversity of perspectives is the way I think one can get the most support for inclusion and diversity in the gender debate. So one of the speakers earlier talked about the importance of being relevant and credible. And I think that's very, very important. Understanding what boards are looking for. Boards are now looking for, in the post-COVID world, people who could handle those 10 themes I mentioned or bring a different perspective on it. And let me just highlight a couple which I think are vitally important. I think the most important big theme out there, and it was touched on in an earlier panel, is purpose. What are we all doing here as a company? What is the role of a company? What's the role of a KPMG? What's the role of a stock exchange? And what's our role in that? And let's be honest with ourselves, how do we discharge it? And the challenge from stakeholders, who are now a myriad range of stakeholders, very different to before, is what do you stand for? How do you do things? What your purpose is? So a different perspective on the board is incredibly important on that. It's all connected. Linked to that is ESG and climate. So one of the big themes would be a fundamental rethink of the purpose of companies and what we're doing. The next mega trend is a quantum step forward on sustainability and ESG. From being nice to have, technical supply side push, into being strategic, governance driven, risk oriented, and owned by the board, and non-negotiable. And this is, I think we step forward hugely. When you link this with COP26, zero carbon targets by 2030, and the pathways countries, economies, and companies need to do to get there, this is like an industrial revolution in terms of the scale of consideration which needs to be given to ESG and climate change. And there's two big things to realize in this. Climate change is now a standalone risk. The central bankers are all aligned on this. The regulators are all aligned. And before long, it will effectively be defined the same as a finance risk. And then all the balance sheet obligations, all of the compliance obligations, all disclosure obligations will get to a new level. So having a good grasp on the direction of travel on sustainability and climate is very important. And the S part of ESG is very neglected in the past. Look at the social challenges as we emerge from COVID. Look at Hong Kong. But look at how the societal impact of what your organization's doing, it can be measured and articulated, requires a certain type of person at the board and a different type of person at the board. Doesn't have to be an expert. It is someone who can touch the vein and feel the pulse of what's happening in society. And the third massive theme out there is digital transformation. And the biggest way to describe it is this has gone beyond technology enablement to do whatever a company is meant to do, into working out what is our purpose, what are we meant to do, and how can digital and the cloud get us there. That is different from looking at what we're doing now and how technology can help us. So these massive themes of purpose, ESG, and digital transformation, I think history, when history books are written, it will be that these three themes were absolutely transformative. And I said akin to almost industrial revolutions in the scale of change which came in. So why do I raise this then? Because the diversity of perspective needed at a board level has never been greater than now. The recognition that boards need to do more in those three areas is well understood. The recognition that the gender diversity discussion is now a question of how you're going to do it, not whether you're going to do it, is one. So the challenge to all of us here is to get rid of those few residual barriers on inclusion and diversity. It could be a subconscious bias. It could be we hold ourselves back, putting ourselves forward. It could be dispelling the absolute nonsense, Bonnie, that there are not enough pool of talent available to satisfy inclusion and diversity. It could be, Katherine, I know we're not going to quotas, but a halfway house of targets and managed and monitored targets could be a way we go. So really, I'm just saying this is a call to arms for all of us who passionately believe in inclusion and diversity, sustainability and governance. The time is ripe now, with all these changes going on, to grab the opportunity. And I think we have a very, very willing audience, because just to wrap up, Bonnie, you've got two great forces driving this. For the first time ever, you've got regulators globally aligned, be it security, insurance, and banking regulators together, or be it them internationally aligned like IOSCO. And then you've got the world of investors aligned, where 25% of the world's asset under management are through some sustainability lens. I think within 3 years, it would be 50%. And certainly within our careers, people will be asking themselves, how did we ever invest in organizations which didn't prioritize sustainability? How do we ever invest in organizations who didn't cherish inclusion and diversity? So I think this is a very good time. And my message to everyone here is, let's be bold and go for it.
Thank you, Andrew. So on Andrew's note of, the optimism of aligning all stakeholders' interests at this very challenging point in time, we will now invite Clara to share her views, especially in her expertise in the metals market and her industry knowledge. Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Bonnie and Carly. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm the CEO of Leaky Holdings. I'm actually from the industrial sector, a Hong Kong-based metals, commodities, and manufacturing company. So with the background of the industrial sector, I've often asked like how is it like, because the general perceptions of these metal manufacturing sectors is quite a male dominant industries, and I would say that this sometimes could be the case, but however, in my 25 years of career in this industry, I witnessed substantial changes in the gender workforce. Female participation in positions ranging like production personnel to senior management executives has increased significantly, although there is still a long way, a lot of room for improvement. But sometimes I think what are the reasons behind for such changes is that I believe that it came down to the benefits of having an acknowledgement to women's ability and also contributions, and how essential these changes can contribute to the competitiveness of the industry to withstand the external shock and changes. I think a diversified workforce with both women and men could help companies view problems and opportunities from different perspectives and enable a better decision-making process. And it is an important element for the company to grow as we bring in different ideas to the business. And I'm not only referring to gender elements, because metals commodities are a global business and require unique skill sets. And our teams must have different skill sets, experience, and backgrounds. And diversity is important, not only for formulating strategic directions, but also in running our day-to-day operation. And diversity also strengthens our teams in terms of capability and our broad-mind views to embrace difference. And from my personal experience, apart from gender equality, I also believe that there is also the experience, skill set, and mindset that counts. And so regardless of the gender, each of us should equip ourselves with the right capability and mindset to confidently contribute in any situation. At the board level, we believe that the board needs to have open mind to embrace all possible ways to formulate sound strategies and ensure good governance practices are in place. So the board should establish a corporate culture to accept different views, including women and people from different nationalities or life experience. And our experience tells us that they can be true champions and bringing truly valuable viewpoints to the boardrooms. And this is also very essential for tackling biases during collective decision-making process. It is the diversity that can make more opinions and different perspectives to be voiced out and enhance board's effectiveness in their governance role. We strongly believe that nowadays a diverse board will bring in innovations and creativities to the business and create more values to the stakeholders. So I believe that this is very important for an organization to have a culture of diversity, but it also takes time to build this culture and make sure that the teams understands the value of it. From my experience, it requires a good communication channels and an open mindset. So I really hope that there will be more boards or corporates will take initiatives to support women in governance with success. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Clara. So we'll now open to our discussion. I will actually start off with some individual questions. Obviously, even if the particular question is directed to any one of you, others are most welcome to chip in if you have any views or supplements to make. So I think let's kick off with the first question for Katherine. Hi, Katherine. As the sub-theme of our session is about corporate governance policies supporting women, would you please share with us your thoughts regarding the establishment of policies by means of education and culture, etc., in Hong Kong in this regard? Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about quota and what the policy should be. I think that for every company, first of all, they should go back and think about what their business lines are, where their risks are, and who their stakeholders are. And then I think if you know the basic, then you can work out what your ideal board looks like. I mean, I always tell companies, or not just companies, sometimes I work with some charities or sporting association, and I kind of try to challenge them a bit, you know, your board of governors, your board of directors do not reflect the community, the wide range of people that you should serve. So maybe that's a starting point. But I think for diversity policy, first of all, it's not just about gender. It is about kind of a diversity of perspective. So we want companies to think hard about it, and also about a pipeline. You think about, of course, you must have the board diversity today, but you need to plan ahead. What does it look like in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time? You know, companies often have 3-year strategic plans, and they should have something similar for their diversity. If as their business plans change, how is their board diversity going to react? I think from Hong Kong, both Hong Kong X and HKSI, where I chair, I'm very grateful that, you know, we do have very good diversity in terms of numbers, and I like to think that we do walk the talk. A lot of our senior management, our MCO, even at the listing division, a lot of the leadership is women. So I'm kind of grateful that at least the place that I work in does support it. So I'll stop at that.
Thank you. So some good ad for Hong Kong exchanges. So the second question goes to Andrew. I mean, as we come out of COVID-19 struggle, what has the world, in particular Hong Kong, done in terms of diversity and inclusiveness, especially gender diversity, which you know is fundamental in combating poverty, protection of the planet, and ensuring sustainability going forward?
I think I just go to what Katherine said before. The only exchange in the world which mandates a diversity policy statement. This was a big turning point. So the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Katherine monitors it very closely. I think I've noticed big change in boardrooms in Hong Kong in the last 10 years. It is a myth to think that in Asia, family groups and family-controlled companies don't push governance. It's a myth. I think sustainability, for example, has always been a big focus in Asia, but it may have not have been labeled as ESG. So the sense of community is always very, very powerful. So I think the building blocks are there, Bonnie. But as I said, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I'm very keen to see the next step on the way the rules are now written. People need to give their indication of whether they're setting targets and how they're getting onto their targets. I think this is really important. I've changed my view over the years, Bonnie. I used to be not pro quotas. I was worried about tokenism and all of this things. I now believe that actually the combination of a regulatory push and the demand of the massive passive investors like BlackRock, Aberdeen Standard Life and others on what Blackstone PE, what good looks like, the combination of that two will give rise to a big acceleration of it. So those people who are still dragging their feet in listed companies or in companies generally about diversity inclusion, I think will find themselves overtaken by events very quickly.
Thank you, Andrew. I think you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, we've got to start somewhere, especially as an IFC. It's also, you know, our stakeholders do measure how we perform vis-a-vis, you know, the international benchmarking. And if we are lagging behind in, you know, in terms of diversity, inclusiveness, sustainability, we actually lose out big time in terms of our investments and attraction as an IFC. So I think the next question would be Clara. So Clara, as a female chief executive, what is some of the added values you could bring to the table, which you think the opposite gender may not be able to?
I think having women on board can make a more effective governance team. There are cases that women are maybe better in communication skills, or have more empathy in understanding interpersonals or communicating on any contentious matters. So I think from the board's point of view that it is very important that the board can have different views in tackling the problems or looking into opportunities, especially nowadays that we look into sustainabilities and data transformation very much. So I think having a more diverse board will give more ideas, and eventually is to create more values to our stakeholders.
Thank you. Andrew, do you have anything to supplement as a male rep?
I now know what it feels like, being the token male. I know what it feels like. And I will now be much more understanding in the future. I would just say, I've noticed there's some very prominent, successful female CEOs and board directors in Hong Kong. And I've noticed that some of them have a greater focus on people and values and purpose. And this is very positive. And I don't want to be labeled as saying women directors tend to be better at people and culture. I don't want to say that, but there is a direct push in terms of, and this is so relevant when actually talent retention is one of the biggest issues, and how talent feels, how Generation X, Z, whatever, all the different generations, how people feel. And I think empathy was touched on before by Ada. I think this is really important. But I don't want to pigeonhole women as being more empathetic, if you know what I mean. But
yes.
The fact I've given a bit of a jumbled answer shows that diversity of perspectives works, because something different is coming to the table from having these very senior female CEOs and directors.
Thank you. I think the next question will be for all of you, just feel free to chip in. It's that given that women often having multiple roles in the prime time of their lives, for example, as moms, wives, dutiful daughters, daughters-in-law, etc., do we have a sufficient pool of female talents to join the C-suite? What is the women pipeline in Hong Kong? And if we do not have a sufficient pool, what more should we do to attract and retain female talent? I think it just writes on to what Andrew just said about retaining talent. So I think specifically, I want to zoom in to ask each of you, what's your views, what's the way forward regarding female talent retention? Thank you.
Shall I start first? I'm
yes,
all
please.
of the above that you talked about.
I know.
I'm a daughter.
I was thinking of you.
I'm a daughter, a wife, a mother of 3, a daughter-in-law. I would like to think a dutiful and subservient, obedient daughter-in-law. So I'm kind of all the above. So I think Hong Kong, I'm very fortunate. I'm happy that I'm in Hong Kong. I don't think I'm blessed in a way. Like, I could not have had all this. I think I started my career in England. I started my career in London. I was a corporate lawyer there. I couldn't have done all this in Hong Kong. So, with everything from childcare to parental support, grandparent support, you do need a bit of, we always laugh about it, but you need a whole network, and you need almost like an ecosystem to help out. But I think Hong Kong is a great place. It's a great place for a woman who wants to work. And in terms of opportunity, I don't think, nobody wants tokenism. No one wants to be there just because they're women. But I think that we do have enough women. We are looking from listed companies' perspective, we are looking for 800 plus women to join the board of listed companies in the next 3 years. It's not small numbers. It's no small numbers. People have come to me and say, hey, why 1? Why not 2? Why not 3? It needs to be a balance. Everyone agrees it cannot be a tokenism. We're not just looking for women for the sake of women. We're looking for a match. We're looking for, someone with the right skill set who could contribute to the board, and women who wants to serve and who's interested in serving that board. So we will start with 1 woman for some boards. Hopefully it'll grow. But I think as we create more board churn through this initiative, as well as the long-serving INED, the succession planning initiative, we should be able to get more women confident and able to serve the Hong Kong community. to be honest, kind of when I was asked to be the chairman, or whether I was interested to be chairman of HKS, I was slightly hesitant. I was like, can I really manage, you know, daytime job, teenage children, traveling and all that? But it's not as bad as it looks or you expect it to be. Once you jump in, you start swimming.
Clara and Andrew, anything to add?
Maybe I can share my views, and I agree with Katherine. I think Hong Kong is actually a very good place for women to participate in many different kinds of industries and also in jobs, especially in my sectors, industrial sector. In fact, we've seen a lot of female joining in different parts of operations in terms of engineering, sales and marketing, or laboratory testing. I think women has quite a lot of opportunities, and also with my role in the Federations of Hong Kong Industries on the leadership levels, we actually have 2 female vice chair out of the 10 chairman's leaderships there. So I think there's opportunities for women, but I think for that is the more we need to do is to encourage that and to show them more successful stories to the female community that we can actually do it, and there's a place for us to participate if we are interested and if we have the capability.
And Andrew, I think yes.
Sorry, I think I'm exactly the same as Katherine on all of those things, but happen to be male. I just thought I'd say that. But the way I see it is there needs to be a change in mindset. One cannot have the model when one's looking for an identikit of an established male board director, someone has all those credentials or whatever, but happens to be a woman. That's the wrong way to look at it. Because you get into too narrow a pool. And I strongly believe there is no shortage of suitable candidates. There needs to be a change in mindset. I was speaking to the head of a big recruiter yesterday, and she was very compelling on this. She's looking much broader at new generation, at middle management, senior management, potential middle management, how to create this pipeline. And Katherine, the great sentence you said, you know, jump in the pool and start swimming. People have just got to give the opportunity. And I think that's a two-way street. It's for the women on the call who may be feeling not quite ready to be prepared to take the plunge, and the organizations who are maybe, when they assess prospective candidates, being much more agile, much more flexible, thinking back to those big themes I was talking about and where we're going to be in 3-5 years' time. And collectively, everybody takes the plunge. But we have to kill this myth, Bonnie, and I find it a very offensive statement when people say there's a shortage of suitable candidates. There isn't. Right. There's a shortage of agile thinking by the people who are making the decisions, I would suggest.
So I think on that note, Andrew, I have a follow-up question, and that will be specific to accounting profession. What is the practice of gender diversity policies among audit firms and the accounting profession, just to enlighten our audience?
Just be very quickly, at KPMG, I think the proportion of partners is something like 48% women, 52% men, something like that. And we're going through our partner promotion round. And I think, again, it's about 50-50. I can honestly say gender considerations have never come up, apart from positively, if one feels a particular batch doesn't give the right diversity, again, not just gender, but diversity. So, we've got people from different backgrounds, different cultures, expatriate, mainland Chinese, local Hong Kongers, male, female, LGBT, we've got everything. How do you get a promotion batch which reflects that so that people feel there's a role for them and comfortable in their own skin? Our managing partner in Hong Kong and our head of audit, our largest practice, are women. And we were very proud, as Clara knows, a few years ago, where the head of the Tax Institute, the head of the ACCA, and the head of HKICPA, the 3 presidents actually were all KPMG partners, and they're all women. and they were all excellent. So that was very transformative for people to see it. So I think actually Hong Kong as a professional environment gives massive opportunities. What I do worry about a bit though, Bonnie, is whether people restrict the broader aspect of life which Katherine has in order to succeed professionally. And that is something we need to look at. So how can we have more successful mothers, wives, all different, people who feel they're able to succeed and their background and their story is part of who they are. And they don't need to fit into a narrow definition of what you need to do to succeed, to become a women partner at a KPMG or elsewhere. I think that's our next challenge. Yes. So the more we hear from the Claras and the Catherines and the stories, the better it is for everybody.
Exactly. Agree. Totally agree. I think the other next question would be, what is each of the views regarding the global objective of achieving 30% board? I mean, I know you've talked a lot about quotas, I understood, but I think objectively, as a IFC for Hong Kong, do we need to strive faster? I mean, do you think the pace now is too slow, too fast for us to move, faster in terms of, say, 30% by 2030, by 2040 or whatnot? I mean, any views?
Maybe I know I just spoke last, but on this, if you speak to people like the Link REIT board is a fantastic board, brilliantly chaired, very diverse. They move very quickly from having one female director into having, 30%. And I think if you go back to a principles, Bonnie, of diversity of perspectives and work back from that, there's no magic to 30%. But there's no point just having one person on the board whose diversity of perspective they don't feel confident enough to raise, or it's not listened to, or they're outnumbered. I've changed my mind over the years, and I'm increasingly coming back to the quota concept. And I think before long, the big passive investors, the big deployers of capital globally are going to require equality, not 30%, equality. And I think that's the way it's heading. So I think we should push very much on targets and name and shame on targets. And then if that doesn't work, into quotas. But then it should be 50%, not 30%.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. Katherine, perhaps, for you to supplement. Fully understand your stance, just, your views on this.
Yeah, I think for me, at least my work at the stock exchange, I want companies to realize the benefit of having a diverse view first. I think as we go through, we talk about COVID, we talk about life examples of how a not diverse board could potentially be at risk to not being agile. We talked about agile. Agile was a word that we used quite a lot about managing the future of the companies of sustainability. But I think with a new generation, I think people or listed companies or investors are much more open and think about diversity. We are going in the right direction, absolutely. Otherwise, there's no way stock exchange could keep upping our game and requiring more, almost on a kind of annual or every 2 years basis. I mean, if you look at global regulations, the fastest developing regulation is around CG and ESG. Andrew and Clara knows it well. I mean, I try to give the listening committee a briefing of what global regulation, the direction of global regulation comes every quarter. And we probably spend 3/4 of the time on CG, ESG, diversity issues. Every week when we try to give some briefing about what happens, this week we had, what did we have? We had a NASDAQ announcing their diversity plan, their diversity requirements. Last week or last month, maybe end of last month, we have FCA consultation being published on diversity. So it's moving faster than we think. It's moving at a much faster pace than it did 10 years ago. I don't think we will take that long to get there, but I mean, at the same time, we want it to be the right woman on the right board, not just women on boards.
Clara, anything to add?
I think the 30% target is to start with is the board needs to think about to meet with this target, but then it's actually helping the board to change the mindset and realize the benefits of having the diversity in the board, especially that we need to face with a fast changing environment after pandemic and the technologies and all that. Do the board need to rethink that whether we want to stay the same as before, or we need to think differently to cope with the fast changing world, especially with the technologies and the ESG sustainability. And then we need more new minds to create more values to the board. So I think it's the objective that I think it is achievable. So I'm quite positive on that.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, so I think to wrap up, I'll just give each of you, a final sort of remarks or tips for our audience regarding women in governance, diversity, inclusiveness, in terms of representing Hong Kong's voice. Katherine, you want to start, or Andrew? Katherine, you want to start?
I'll let Andrew go first.
On me.
Normally the ladies first.
Back to the minority go first.
Minority first.
I quite like this actually. How to be relevant and credible is different from having to be an expert in everything. And relevant and credible means, and then if it's about diversity of perspectives, one's got to have the confidence and belief that your perspective has value, and be authentic, and not try and respray oneself into being what one is not. And this is why I think governance, values, culture and conduct, and how one thinks about that can make one very, very valuable. And one doesn't need to be a subject matter expert on ESG, climate, digital, but one needs to know what's right, what's wrong, what good looks like, and what's the right way to do things, and the importance of purpose. When you think of it that way, it suddenly becomes more accessible and more possible. And to be honest, if the people one's approaching to try and get on to be a candidate, if people don't accept that for what it is, I wouldn't worry about it and move on to the next one. So being authentic and pushing what one's life story and one's empathy and one's perspective is the key.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. I think Katherine will go last then. Clara first.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I think a board should have the capability to formulate strategies to face with the fast changing business environment. And building these capabilities requires continuous review of the current process, keeping update with the changes and embracing new ideas from the diverse mindsets. So I think that this is the mindset and the culture that the company or the board should have in order to create values for the stakeholders.
Thank you, Clara. And Katherine.
Yeah, I think I just want to leave maybe with one or two words. I think to me, diversity of perspective is having different views. So I would encourage the board to see when they have a board meeting, is everyone in agreement? If they are, then there's probably something wrong. I'm not saying that there needs to be a huge argument, but we're looking for different perspectives. Different is the key word. If you're able to spot different issues, you look at things differently, then the chances of you're covering all aspects of an issue is much greater. So, and when we have team meetings or brainstorm about policies, I always tell my team, look, if you agree, we only have an hour. If you agree with what the other person has to say, please don't say anything. We appreciate it. I'm sorry, but we only have 1 hour. So let's talk about different views, different things, and we want to collect and listen to as many different perspectives as possible in the hour. So this is something maybe as something that boards should be aware of and think about.
So true, so practical. So thank you, Katherine, Andrew, and Clara. I hope our audience today found his or her voice in our discussions. As mentioned at the beginning of this session, this dialogue of Women in Governance series is a continuous and concerted effort for the world to focus and drive for gender diversity, though of which board diversity is particularly important for Hong Kong if it wishes to maintain its status as an international financial center. Let's all continue to work harder, strive to achieve this much needed goal for a better world. Before I hand over the platform back to Carly to conclude this session, I would like to thank again our three wonderful speakers, Katherine Ng, Andrew Weir, and Clara Chan, and all of you joining us today. Over to Carly, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Andrew, Clara, and Katherine. Very inspiring discussions. I stand to benefit from your wisdom that has given us food for thought. In particular, I look forward to the conclusion of the consultation by Hong Kong EX. I believe in the proposal to break the single gender board. And I really, it's not a quota per se, as some people may speak against it, but I feel that it is really an ice-breaking point that can bring single gender board into diversity. Okay, at this point in time, I would like to come back to our keynote speaker. After having heard the vivid panel discussion, Ada, would you like to give us some brief final words, say in 1 minute?
Thank you, Carly. I think it has been a very insightful and interesting discussion. And I think the consensus is that there is no question that diversity is beneficial for the company. And there is no question of whether we should go for diversity, but it is a question of how to do it and how to do better. And I believe that in the situation of Hong Kong, although we haven't been making very good progress in the past 10 years, I do believe that we will be making much progress in the next 10 years, given the strategic position of Hong Kong and the economic situation and all the efforts of us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada, for giving us the final remarks. We have come to the end of this session, and indeed the conclusion of the conference series. This conference has generated messages to the world which are clear, vigorous, non-militant, inspiring, and convincing. One astounding observation by a speaker was that at the current pace, we need over 100 years to catch up. With persistent messages, culture building, and talent development, let us fast track the catching up. I hope that participants are satisfied with the conference and willing to spread our call for global attention and action. On behalf of the 6 institutes organizing this conference, I extend gratitude to all speakers of the conference, to all attendees who gather on this online platform from different time zones, and to the 6 organizing institutes colleagues who have worked hard to produce this conference. Finally, I would like to call upon the CEOs of the 6 institutes to say cheerio in alphabetical order of institutes. Kamla, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Carly.
Kamla, please.
Thank you very much, Carly. And I just want to say goodbye to all of you. Thank you for participating, and best wishes from us, from the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute.
Yes, thank you, Kamla. Jane, please. If Jane is not there, Noor.
Yes. On behalf of Jane and the GCC BDI Board of Directors Institute, thank you, Ma Salame, and best wishes to you all.
Thank you. And Sheila, do we have Sheila here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Carlyle. In fact, on behalf of Mauritius Institute of Directors, I would like to say thank you and goodbye. Goodbye, and thanks once again for this great session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. And Kirsten, please.
Hi there. Good night, everyone. Thank you from New Zealand. Best wishes. We look forward to seeing you take up the challenge.
Okay. And Pami, do we have Pami here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So
Pami, please.
From my side, goodbye to all our delegates and best wishes to all of you from South Africa.
Okay. Lastly, this is Kali Cherry. Goodbye, Zoigin, and best wishes from the Hong Kong Institute of Directors. Meeting is adjourned.